The house felt different lately. Colder in some ways but warmer in others. Like everything had shifted without warning, yet settled in a new normal that I couldn't quite describe. When Daniel, my husband, had his stroke last year, everything changed. One moment he was my steady partner, strong and determined, and the next, he was confined to a wheelchair, barely able to speak. The vibrant man I had built a life with had faded behind tired eyes and slow, halting movements. He tried, he really did, but the spark that once lit up our home was gone. And so, our world, which had been filled with weekend gatherings, lively games of billiards, and friends spilling into the house with laughter, grew quiet. Too quiet. Our son, Aaron, stepped up in ways I never anticipated. At 18, he wasn't just a boy trying to find his footing in the world anymore. Overnight, he became a man, one who carried responsibilities far heavier than any young man should have to. He helped Daniel up the stairs, assisted with his daily routines, and never once complained. His presence filled the void in ways that were comforting yet unsettling. I first noticed the change in him one evening, just after sunset, when the sky outside the living room window burned orange and pink. I had been folding laundry when Aaron walked in. His shirt clinging to his chest from the afternoon workout he had squeezed in between helping his dad and studying for exams. "Need a hand with that, Mom?" he asked, flashing a grin that had become more confident, more self-assured. I shook my head, smiling back. "I've got it, but thanks." He sat down across from me, watching as I folded a pair of Daniel's sweatpants. "You do too much, you know," he said, his voice softer now, like he was sharing a secret. "You take care of Dad, the house, and still somehow make everything seem normal." "Someone has to," I replied, my fingers lingering over the fabric. "But who takes care of you?" His question hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. I glanced up, meeting his gaze, and for a moment I felt exposed. He wasn't just asking out of curiosity. He had been paying attention, noticing the cracks in the foundation I had worked so hard to hold together. His eyes, deep and warm, seemed to see right through me, and I hated how much I wanted to crumble under that gaze. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Really?" Aaron didn't press, but the way his fingers drummed softly against the table told me he wanted to. Instead, he stood, stretched, and placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was both comforting and grounding. "You're not alone, Mom," he murmured before heading upstairs to check on Daniel. It wasn't long before those small gestures became a part of our routine. Aaron wasn't just helping around the house. He was helping me. When he noticed I was tired, he'd suggest I sit down while he took over making dinner. When I stayed up late sorting through bills, he'd bring me a cup of tea and sit quietly beside me, his presence alone easing the weight I carried. One evening, after we had managed to get Daniel comfortably settled for the night, Aaron found me in the kitchen, staring blankly at a recipe book I wasn't really reading. The light above the stove cast a soft glow, and outside, rain tapped gently against the windows. "You're spacing out again," he teased, leaning against the counter. I chuckled, closing the book. "Just tired." "Then let me take care of dinner," he offered, already pulling ingredients from the fridge. "You've done enough today. Let me do this, Mom." His voice was firm but kind, the kind of tone Daniel used to have when he wanted to reassure me that everything would be okay. "You don't always have to be the one holding everything together." I watched him move around the kitchen, the ease with which he handled everything reminding me how much he had changed. He wasn't the boy who used to leave dirty dishes in the sink or forget to take out the trash. He was steady, reliable, and so much like the man I had once fallen in love with. Dinner that night was simple: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and rice, but it was the warmth of the conversation that filled me more than the food. Aaron shared stories about his classes, his friends, and his plans for the future. I listened, but my mind kept wandering to how seamlessly he had taken on a role that wasn't meant for him. When the meal was over, I leaned back in my chair, watching as Aaron cleared the table. He caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" he asked, smirking. "Nothing," I said quickly, but my heart betrayed me, fluttering at the way he smiled, a smile that reminded me too much of the past and not enough of the present. It wasn't until later that night, when the house was quiet and the weight of the day pressed down on me, that I allowed myself to acknowledge the shift between us. I had always loved Aaron, of course, but this was different. His presence had become a lifeline, and I wasn't sure how to navigate the emotions that came with that realization. The next morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains, Aaron knocked gently on my bedroom door before poking his head inside. "Morning," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "Morning. I thought we could go out today," he suggested, stepping inside. "Just you and me. Maybe get some air, grab lunch." I hesitated, glancing at the clock. "What about your dad?" "I already made sure he's taken care of," Aaron said, his confidence unwavering. "Please, Mom. Let me do this for you." His words echoed in my mind long after we left the house. We drove in comfortable silence, the kind that felt more like a conversation than anything else. When we arrived at the small cafe on the edge of town, Aaron held the door open for me, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back as we walked in. We talked about everything and nothing, the way we used to before life had thrown us into this new reality. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not just a caregiver or a wife trying to hold everything together, but a woman deserving of love and attention. When we returned home that evening, the house didn't feel quite as cold. The house seemed to hold its breath that night, waiting for something neither of us could define. The faint hum of the heater was the only sound as I tucked Daniel into bed, his eyelids drooping from exhaustion. He gave me a small, tired smile as I adjusted his blanket, and though his words had been scarce since the stroke, I knew he appreciated the gesture. "Good night," I whispered, brushing a kiss across his forehead before turning off the lamp. As I shut the door quietly behind me, the hallway seemed unusually long and dim, my footsteps soft on the floor. When I reached the end, Aaron was waiting, leaning casually against the wall with that same warm, boyish grin that had a habit of unraveling me in ways I wasn't prepared for. "Is he asleep?" he asked, his voice low. He nodded. "Out like a light." Aaron glanced down the hall, as if confirming that Daniel wouldn't need us for a while, before turning back to me. "Good. Let's do it. Billiards. Just like we used to." I laughed softly, shaking my head as memories of those carefree weekend nights flickered through my mind. "You know, I'm a bit rusty." "Don't worry," he said with a wink. "I'll take it easy on you. For a little while at least." I couldn't help but smile at his playful tone, the way it transported me back to a time when life wasn't weighed down by constant responsibility. We used to invite friends over every weekend, drinks in hand, as Daniel and I teamed up against Aaron and his friends for friendly matches. But those days had slipped away, faded into a past that felt unreachable. Until tonight. Aaron led the way to the billiards room, a space that had gathered more dust than memories lately. As he switched on the lights, the warm glow illuminated the table and the walls adorned with family photos, reminders of when life had been simpler. He grabbed the cues and tossed one to me, catching me off guard as I fumbled with it before laughing. "Still got those reflexes, I see," he teased, stepping closer to set up the game. I rolled my eyes, feeling the first hint of lightness in my chest that had been absent for far too long. "Watch it. I used to beat you at this, remember?" He grinned. "Used to. But let's see if you can still hold your own." The game began, and with each turn, the tension in my shoulders melted further away. Aaron had a way of making me forget about the weight I carried. The bills, the caregiving, the sleepless nights spent worrying about whether I was doing enough for Daniel and Aaron. Here, in this moment, I wasn't a wife balancing a delicate life or a mother trying to stay strong. I was just me, and Aaron's laughter echoed like music in the room, reminding me how much I had missed this. "Nice shot," he said, watching as I sank one of the balls into the corner pocket. "You've still got it." "Beginner's luck," I teased, twirling the cue between my fingers. He stepped closer, circling the table as he lined up his next shot. "It's more than luck, Mom. You're good. And you're beautiful too." I stilled, the words catching me off guard. There was something in the way he said it, not like the passing compliments I received from acquaintances or the polite flattery that came with birthday cards. His voice carried something deeper, more genuine, and it knocked the wind out of me for a moment. Aaron must have noticed my reaction because he straightened and looked at me, his gaze unwavering. "You don't hear that enough, do you?" I forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. "Oh, stop. I'm just—" "Don't do that," he interrupted softly. "Don't downplay it. You deserve to hear it." A whirlwind of emotions stirred inside me, crashing into one another like waves during a storm. There was a part of me that wanted to dismiss his words as playful banter, but another part, the part that had felt neglected, unseen, and forgotten for so long, wanted to hold on to them like a lifeline. I swallowed hard, focusing on the table as I lined up my next shot. The cue ball rolled across the felt but missed the pocket by an inch. "I guess I've lost my touch," I muttered, but my voice lacked conviction. Aaron chuckled, moving to stand beside me. "Not everything needs to be perfect," he said, his hand grazing mine briefly as he handed me the chalk. "Sometimes it's okay to miss." Something about the way he said it made my breath hitch. I looked up at him, and for a moment time seemed to slow. His gaze was warm and steady, as if he were trying to tell me something without saying it aloud. And then, just like that, the moment passed. He stepped back, his grin returning as he prepared for his next shot. "But don't think I'm going to go easy on you now. I'm still here to win." The playful energy returned, but my heart continued to race as the game carried on. Aaron made me laugh, really laugh, in a way I hadn't since before the stroke changed everything. He teased me about my form, exaggerated his own moves, and celebrated every ball he sank with a victory dance that had me clutching my stomach in laughter. When the final ball dropped into the pocket, he threw his arms up in mock triumph. "Victory is mine. Only because I let you win," I shot back, still breathless from laughing. "Sure you did," he said, closing the distance between us. "Next time I'll give you a rematch." I rolled my eyes, but before I could respond, he pulled me into a hug. It wasn't the quick, casual embrace of a son hugging his mother after dinner or before heading out the door. It was warm, lingering, and full of meaning, like he was silently telling me that I wasn't alone, that he saw me in ways no one else did. I hesitated, my hands resting lightly against his back before I finally allowed myself to sink into the comfort of his embrace. His chin rested gently against my shoulder, and for a moment I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his presence chase away the loneliness that had taken root in my chest for far too long. When we pulled away, the room felt quieter, as if it too was holding its breath. "Thanks for tonight," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He smiled softly. "We should do this more often." And for the first time in a long while I felt hopeful. Maybe we would. Maybe laughter and late-night games could become a part of our lives again, even if everything else had changed. Because in that moment, with Aaron by my side, I believed that healing wasn't just possible, it had already begun. The pool table groaned slightly beneath us as Aaron hopped up onto it, his legs dangling off the side. He patted the empty spot next to him and raised an eyebrow with that playful smirk that always disarmed me. "Come on, Mom," he teased, holding up a glass of wine he had just poured for me. "Let's celebrate my victory." I chuckled, though my heart still hadn't quite settled from the way his arms had wrapped around me in that hug moments ago. I climbed up beside him, the felt of the table soft beneath me, and took the glass from his hand. "To your win," I said, clinking my glass against his. The sound was soft but seemed to echo in the quiet room, a room that now felt like it existed outside of time, away from responsibilities, heartaches, and the endless loop of caregiving. Aaron smiled as he sipped his drink, leaning back slightly on his hands. "You're not a bad loser, you know," he joked, nudging my arm gently. I was expecting more trash talk. "Don't get used to it," I replied with a mock glare. "Next time I won't go so easy on you." He laughed, the sound warm and rich, and it filled the space in a way that made me feel like everything could be okay, even just for tonight. The wine warmed my chest, but it was Aaron's presence, his steady gaze, his teasing words, that made my pulse race in a way that I hadn't felt in years. As we sat there, sipping and talking, I found myself forgetting the heaviness that usually pressed down on me. Aaron had that effect on me tonight, lifting me up without even trying. His laughter reminded me of when he was younger, a carefree boy who used to run around the house with boundless energy, asking me a million questions about the world. But now, there was something else in the way he looked at me, something deeper that left me breathless if I thought about it too much. "So," Aaron said, turning toward me, his knee brushing against mine, "what was your favorite part of tonight? Besides me being a gracious winner, of course." I rolled my eyes, but the smile on my face betrayed how much fun I was having. "Probably seeing you do that ridiculous victory dance," I teased. "You looked like a chicken trying to escape a coop." He laughed, nearly spilling his wine as he shook his head. "It was graceful," he corrected, grinning. "You just didn't appreciate the artistry." "Artistry, my foot." We fell into comfortable laughter, and as it faded, a comfortable silence settled between us. I could feel his eyes on me, the weight of his gaze something I both craved and feared. I knew if I turned my head I'd see it, the warmth, the tenderness, and something else simmering just beneath the surface. "You know," he said softly, breaking the quiet, "I've missed this. Seeing you like this. You're happy tonight, and I don't think I've seen you this relaxed in a long time." I exhaled, my fingers lightly tracing the stem of my glass. "It's been a long time since I've felt this relaxed," I admitted. I forgot what it was like to just enjoy myself. Aaron shifted closer, the warmth of his body radiating against mine. "You deserve to feel like this all the time, Mom." There it was again, that depth to his voice that made my chest tighten. I glanced over at him, and the look in his eyes made my breath hitch. It wasn't just the affection of a son for his mother. It was something more layered, something that made the air between us feel charged and dangerous. "Aaron," I murmured, unsure of what I was trying to say, but he didn't look away. His gaze held mine, steady and unrelenting, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You don't know how amazing you are," he whispered, his voice low and intimate. "You've spent all this time taking care of everyone else, and I don't think anyone's taken the time to remind you how special you are." I blinked, feeling the sting of tears threatening to surface. His words hit me in a place I hadn't allowed anyone to reach in years. I had buried so much of myself beneath the weight of responsibility that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, not as a mother, not as a caregiver, but as a woman. "Aaron, you..." He leaned forward slightly, his hand brushing mine, the touch gentle but deliberate. "It's true," he said, his thumb lightly grazing my knuckles. "See you. I see everything you've done for us, and you're incredible." The sincerity in his voice unraveled me. My chest rose and fell with uneven breaths as I tried to process the flood of emotions crashing over me. How did he know exactly what to say to break through the walls I had so carefully built? I laughed softly, the sound shaky and fragile. "You're making me feel like a little girl again," I admitted, wiping at the corner of my eye before the tear could escape. "No one said things like that to me in so long." Aaron's hand tightened slightly around mine, and when I looked up, his eyes were darker, more serious. "Then I'm glad I said them," he murmured. "You deserve to hear them every day." My heart thudded in my chest as he leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin. Every rational thought screamed at me to pull away, to create distance, but my body stayed rooted in place. My fingers trembled slightly as they gripped the edge of the table. And then it happened. Until. His lips brushed mine in a kiss that was both hesitant and certain, as if he was testing the waters but already knew the answer. The world around us seemed to fall away, the wine glass slipping from my hand onto the felt, the hum of the heater, the shadows on the walls. None of it mattered. For that brief, stolen moment, there was only him and the warmth of his kiss, a kiss that made me forget everything else. His hand cupped my cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against my skin as he deepened the kiss just enough to send a shiver down my spine. When we finally pulled apart, I could barely breathe. My pulse raced, my thoughts jumbled, but all I could do was stare at him, his face still close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "I've been wanting to do that all night," Aaron admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. How could I explain the whirlwind of emotions coursing through me? The confusion, the exhilaration, the undeniable pull toward him. He smiled softly, as if sensing my inner turmoil, and leaned back just enough to create space between us. "We'll take it slow," he promised. "One game at a time." I let out a shaky laugh, relief and warmth flooding through me. "I guess that means you're looking forward to our next game of pool?" "You have no idea," he replied, his gaze lingering on mine for just a moment longer before he slid off the table and extended a hand to help me down. As I took his hand and followed him out of the room, I knew that tonight had changed everything. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next.